I can see the strobe
Oh
lights.
yeah. We're streaming now. I have this music I was so happy to have here. Hi, this is BetaCodex Live. My name is Ryan Erickson, and in the background you've heard a hint of one of the folks here today, our special guest. And I'm just gonna get rid of all the penalty box stuff. I'm gonna move myself here on the side of the screen and introduce you to the person on that side of the screen. That's Niels Pflaeging, as you can read. And down there, who should not be down, is Mr. David Fearon. He of the Free Range Teaching and Professor Emeritus of Connecticut State
University.
Connecticut State University. So cool. All right. Well, welcome, Dave, to the playground that Niels and I have been hosting for a while. And I would love for you to tell the Betaverse a little bit about you in a moment or two and how it is that you've come to be an educator and what you want to do with that education. So how about that?
Well, education writ large has always been a preoccupation of mine, even way back in the early days, high school. I always thought that one way or another I was going to be an educator. However, I must say, even then, I didn't have any notion that education and schooling are the same thing. We need to, from this moment through the conversation, let's set schooling and education into two sort of streams. They certainly are concurrent, but education is an outstream from schooling and in-stream. But my whole career has looked at education as a community, as wide as you want to widen the community. Now with what we have with Zoom and so forth, it's the world. Why would I have such ambition? Because I think so much of the best learning, maybe I'll throw a percentage in, 80% of the learning that grows people and they grow themselves and grow each other, comes from inducements that are existing everywhere to learn something. So over time, with lots of different career spaces that I could occupy as a community educator, and then eventually a professor of organizational behavior, I've had this curse in a way that everywhere I look, I'm looking for where the learning's happening. So when I heard that we're going to be talking about educating for complexity, that's the scope that I work in. Now, in order to deal with that possible insanity, I have another part, and then I'll let you guys get right at it. So if you have this huge scope, how do you pause and learn something yourself and perhaps even act as a teacher? Well, the answer to that is you have to look way in close and pick out perhaps even one person out of the whole, and look very closely, get close to that person and have a conversation. What's amazing is over the years, as I've done that, every person I can think of, if I gave them a little more time to open up, is linked out to that whole wide universe, and they're experiencing education in their own way. So that's about me.
Well, that's Dave. Wonderful that you're opening a riff. I love that. So, Niels, I would love to hear a little bit about your maybe your reflection on what Dave has said, and however you want to come into this space in our topic of educating for our favorite topic, complexity.
Oh my goodness! I just got warmed up to Dave's words and wanted to hear more and more specifics.
Well, we can go back to a trio if you want to just kind of.
Yeah, we have to. But let me then connect maybe to what Dave just said. The educate. I mean, I just looked at Dave's online LinkedIn profile before we started this session, and when I read there that you held a teaching position for 30 years at an institution, Dave.
At one place, and then 55 total. So yeah.
Yeah, that is
always had to have a paycheck. I'm not that brave.
Which kind of tells us a lot about your background and and also your stamina in staying in teaching and but just to relate to it, I myself taught at 7 different business schools in Switzerland, Austria, and in Germany. And currently, I have no teaching position, sadly, at no college, which I find very sad. But it was all discontinued before COVID, during COVID, soon after COVID, which, of course, it's totally self-referential, if I say so, but I think this is part of the story of the continuing decay of college education, in business administration at least. I sometimes wonder why I'm not teaching anymore, because I really want to. But yeah, that's a different, maybe, or just part of the conversation. So I got my and just to relate to, of course, I researched Dave's content. There's a lot of online content, lots of podcasts, videos. Especially, you produced a book together with Peter Vale as well, which I couldn't get my hands on, sadly. But never. And you collaborated with fabulous people, if I got that right. Eric Dent, is he one of your prior collaborators as well?
Eric and I, in different decades, were Peter Vale's students in graduate work. I was at the University of Connecticut, where he was for a time. And then when I finished my dissertation under Peter's very stern tutelage, get it done, Dave, he then moved on to George Washington, where he met Eric as a student some years later. And that, what I've done, the way this whole podcast has evolved is very organic. It's people who fascinate me. So sometimes it's a former student, and sometimes it's people like former Vail students, where we can talk about what Peter did for us and why. So yeah, it's a meander. But again, my point was, it's outside of the strictures. It's not publishable or peer reviewed, or you know the drill. I've done that too, but I did it only to be promoted to full professor. I had very little belief that anything I put into a journal was going to be cited. So what I wanted to be was out where I could play with, not, just be in the very large sandbox. And I've done a lot of breakouts over the years as a professor, with some sabbaticals, some hospital system purchased a quarter of my load so I could be on site for over 2 years. I mean, there's all kinds of ways I was saying, let me out. I want to see what people are doing and how the trends that we're all swirling around in, there's your white water, how are we staying afloat? By the way, I was a lifeguard and a swimming instructor, so the water analogy fit very nicely into my fear reactions when I see people starting to get under. And yes, I think business schools and many other aspects of colleges and universities are being flooded with whitewater. So,
yes. I like this quote by Russell Ackoff. Business schools as reformable as cemeteries, and for the same reasons. I think that's a good quote.
Yeah, he was a little harsh. One of his favorite doctoral students have been a good friend of mine for years, Joan Wiener. And I said to Joan, there's all these legends about Russell and being gruff. And Peter, by the way, really liked him. And they had some very good conversations over the years. And she said, well, what have you heard? And I said, blah, blah, blah. She said, yeah, that's but it was
very to the point.
He had a wonderfully restless mind. And he would agree with us that it would be lovely if you could be the kind of thinker and activist that you need to be, if you would be allowed to be in the strictures of a school, university, college, however you want to define it. Now, there are many exceptions. I'm a liberal arts graduate from a small college in Maine, from through to 65. And during that period of time, it was a restive period. You realize Vietnam was just kicking in and so forth, and we were breaking out of our crew cuts and our sweaters and the blue Oxford shirts, and starting to get a little feisty. But boy, I'll tell you, I could put a pin down anywhere in that little college, and around that pin, there's every discipline that I knew of at the time, and complete freedom of motion. If I was starting a paper as a sociology major and I want to know something about geology, I just wander into the geology.
Something that doesn't exist anymore. Yes, of
Tell
course.
me about how do rocks and local governments compare?
Yes.
And I said, well, rocks endure a little longer than local governments, but they both are eroded. So it was always that freedom, and it was perfect. Yeah. So the rest of my career, I've always figured out how to find the very safe edge and then an unsafe edge of where I'm working. This is back to complexity, so that I could, because it was so quiet relatively in the safe side. You'd think there'd be robust conversations and people walking around having great ideas and pulling each other together for instant seminars. No, not at least not in my 50 years of experience. It was rare. But if I stepped outside as a professor and struck up a conversation in a corporation, a local government, a hospital, all the places I've been, it's fantastic, because I had the obligation then in these conversations to do what you do, I know, Niels, which is get the hell back there and read, find some relevance and bring it. Hey, this is, you may not want to read all 50 pages of this article, but read the beginning and the conclusions, because it ties in very much with what you have been presenting to me in our conversation. And I did a lot of that ad nauseum for the people who had to see me coming. Oh no, he's got a book in his hand. But it was fun.
Interesting that you mentioned that when you studied, I understood that it was the second half of the 60s or so?
Well, I earned my doctorate in 1974.
1974. Okay, much later. Okay.
My undergrad.
But you said that you were able to study in different disciplines. There were no boundary.
Yeah. Well, you had to have a major at this little college.
Yeah.
Of course. But if you were, and we had a research orientation. So it's like, oh, you have a question? See what you can find. If you can't find, be sure before you look in the library, see if you can have a good conversation. I know Professor so-and-so in economics has an interest in this, or go over to the music program.
Yes.
Because, they know a lot about teams. So it was, and I'm on the verge of saying this is what I think the school side of education ought to be like now.
Yes. I mean, this is, I find those remarks very interesting, because that would be unfathomable today to look into any other discipline than your own, right? The boundaries or walls, or let's say fences, have gone up, frontiers between. I mean, I studied business or economics, and it's unfathomable to even talk of sociology, psychology, politics, or whatever, philosophy in those arenas, because it cannot exist. It's totally, and which so is certainly part of the decline of education that we see, that we have continued to divide into different. The different sciences have been isolated from each other, have become much more narrow-minded. I always like to say that the last business thinker who systematically thought about philosophy and sociology was probably Douglas McGregor, at least in my mind. It's not true. Peter Vale also was one of these types.
Well, Peter loved
Henry Linzberg or so.
He studied with McGregor. He loved McGregor's way of thinking, way of being. And of course,
which crossed the boundary of business administration into psychology and sociology, of course.
Very
and it was necessary to get to decent ideas. Today, I would say it's rather impossible in management sciences, for example, to stumble upon anything good, because you don't stumble.
Well, let's look at that factum that colleges and universities tend to be very much siloed now in departments and disciplines, and, and they're not cross the line unless you're having coffee, and don't be seen chatting with someone who isn't, businessy. So that is going on, and even to some degree in K-12 and the U.S. is kindergarten to high school. It's been regimented along lines that have been existing for 100+ years. We used to call it the factory model. Bring a kid through, pop them out, give them a rating, and send them out. That has persisted an awful long while. It's been propped up by law and finance and even a class system, in my experience. The elite kids do not go to public schools. Connecticut is replete with private secondary schools, the price of which would stagger you. Those families do not want their kids in a public school, and it's not because of, I don't think it's because of being away from race or low class. It's because they know that these private schools will give their little Buffy or little Seth a lot of personal attention, a lot of latitude, preparation across the traditional subjects. When they go to an elite university like Harvard or my former school, Colby, they will have an expanded mind, and they will not be afraid of complexity. I'm tuning in. I'm projecting that that's how those families are aware, because the very successful people who can make the money to send them there are right up to their eyeballs in complexity. They know if you commute to New York that morning to get into the city, you know that there's so much going on, so many things coming at you, so much to deal with just to get from to the train to the city to your desk, if you're still going in, which has changed, of course, with the pandemic. A lot of people aren't. Still, then they're in there dealing with all kinds of crossfire. Whatever your title says on the plaque on your door, it's all crossfire. If you're marketing, you're definitely dealing with sociological, political, economic, and you name it, trends. You have to be.
Sure.
And if you think data is going to deal with it, or big data, well, that is taking a little cup, dipping it in to this miasma of stuff that's going on, and then trying to analyze it and make some projections from it. Most of the people who have that kind of power and wealth understand, I think. Not that I hang out with them. Some ways I used to. One stage of my career, I lived in Darien, Connecticut in the mid-'60s, when it was the bedroom for Madison Avenue. So, and some people on my board were those kind of people who were naming things like "band doesn't wear off as the day wears on." The guy who made that jingle bought a house with it. So I'm rambling. Let me get back to our host, Ryan. Ryan, pull me in.
Well, so I'm obviously want to bathe in the history and the riff that you got there. But one thing you mentioned, again, getting back to the topic of complexity.
Yes.
And the first thing that came up, so I'm in my car, I'm trying to deal with what's here. This person has their own, they're driving this way, that way, this miasma, morass of complexity, just driving, being maybe, I have to get out of this so I can get back to the complicatedness of, I'm going to write my paper. I'm going to publish my paper. I'm going to get cited, and then I'm going to get promoted, and then I'm going to have, boy, and then I can promote so this idea that the world around us, this living world of human beings, of surprise, and all of this beautiful, marvelous, the white water, the red of complexity, is this it is something to be escaped instead of something to be enjoyed and something to be relished. I think that's part of what I have, again, in our conversations, that the educational industrial complex, if you will, and talking about processing people into roles of compliance and all of that.
Right.
The system is, this idea of, I know Niels, you'll hate this, but I'm happy to put it out. There's this idea of this comfort. Right? I want to get out of this discomfort of complexity,
right?
And I want to get into the stability of the educational system, and I think that is that's the water you're swimming in, or that has since for as long as we can remember the educational system happening. It does a disservice to people once they get out of the ivory tower. And
there you go. That's the key. If you're preparing yourself as a professor and you're preparing your students in the relative quiet and in the somewhat necessary boundaries that a college represents, then you probably aren't preparing him to step out that door. Unless, and this is Peter Vale and me, unless you realize your obligation is to help them become superb learners. Not just learners, not just memorizers, not just superb learners. Now, if you're working on that, no matter what your subject is, no matter what the syllabus says, but within it, you're speaking away to be sure that even though it's nice and easy for them to write that paper and hand it in, that thought process needs to also be expanded so that they say, okay, you did some very good close down. Peter and I call it eliminative. You've eliminated a lot of things that you could write about in this paper, and you've cited the things that are close. Great. Now, back out again. Look at every one of those citations and think, where did those come from? What was the genesis of those? Where did those ideas originate? That that are now third hand or so by the time you read it. And so you're constantly saying, okay, in close, focus, but out quickly as possible to get your mind expanded again. So you're constantly developing, again, what we call a learning practice, that you're a practicing learner as well as a reflective and all the other lovely type. But you are able to see yourself in this large, crazy world running into the building and on Times Square. And you have your head on your shoulders, and you're noticing a lot more than you would if you weren't in this opportunity to have a quiet education before you get to the noisy side. Why? Because you're reflective, your perspectives are on high, and so every step you're taking going up into that building, you are generating awareness and possible ideas. And that's the part I loved. I mean, the idea that, remember, every minute of your existence, there are ideas of other people, but you're having them too. And I think we're going to Neil. I will go to Neil. I think my son is fascinated with complexity, and he's doing a lot to get himself up to speed on this, because he understands, and helping his old dad understand, how much more you can almost feel your brain working when you're reading through some of this stuff or watching someone's YouTube who's done a lot of very profound thinking about complexity. And I would like to have every citizen in the world relish that awareness that anything you see that you're trying to make simple isn't, but you're going to make it simple so you can at least exist with it for a few moments. But just as soon as you think you've got it all nailed down and, okay, now I know what this is, it'll explode. And we don't want fearful people who run away from
it. Right. So Niels, there's a lot we put in the room, and I haven't quite heard how you've where you are with this and what you've
In other words,
got
Dave,
cooking in your mind.
let Niels speak.
Well, no, I have to apologize because I was trying to move some production around, and I think I blew up Niels's video, so I apologize for that.
No worries. I think I blew something up on my side and had to leave the session and come in again. But no, I lost just a minute or two. Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing in this conversation is education and learning. Learning is complex. Education is complex. Can we really educate others? So these matters of complexity and education learning are all, they are complex themselves and also influencing our abilities to deal with complexity or not, or in a better way or worse, and to connect with others to deal with complexity more successfully or not. And yeah, I think that's a very nice sum up that you just delivered, Dave, on this. Yeah.
The not or not looking at humans behaving with each other in organization, the denial of the complexity, the stepping back from it, the avoidance of it. If you continue that out through a whole population, you've got the 2024 election, national election here in the States. Just a whole lot of people who had one person saying it's all simple, I've got it, just da-da-da-da.
Yes.
And then another
only
candidate,
I can fix it.
Another candidate saying you people have to understand these things don't happen overnight. We have to take into consideration all these factors. A complexity awareness person, like one candidate, and a other person who's saying, I'll keep it simple for you folks. Go have a beer, check the news. That's I'm exaggerating, but on a sense, so it's a very dangerous time. And if we have schools in the midst of all this, where they're banning books and where they're now so-called removing diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can't remove it, but they're saying we're going to take it out, punishing university professors with firing for saying one or two sentences that got quoted over and over again, and on, so that as you said, I think you said earlier, Neil, you're seeing kind of the disintegration of even that quieter place where you can build up your thought muscles and your heart and your courage to step out into that world is also becoming infiltrated with the same stuff, which is basically, I'm going to have to stop burbling here in a second, but I have to tell you, one of the things,
Dave, breathe.
Well, let me tell you one of the things that scared the absolute poop out of me. Can you say poop on all? Yeah,
you can say shit if you want. We're not safe for work podcast.
Okay, so I follow the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'd get these daily news blasts from the Chronicle of Higher Education, and some years back, there was a piece that said that Texas is now going to allow college and university students to have open carry in the classroom. And I thought, there it is. That's the
open
end.
Carry. What is that? Open carry?
A gun.
Oh.
Open carry, not booze. God knows they probably snuck that in over the years. Something a hell of a lot more dangerous. You walk into the room and you've got a pistol on your hip, and you're a sophomore, and you really didn't like that B-. And to me, it was like the absolute ice coming in and icing over academic freedom, because it's two ways. You've got to feel free as a person teaching from fear and from the possible loss of life in order to express yourself and in behalf of the students' growth and learning. So when I saw that, I go, oh my God. And now it's creeping out like the way ice forms out more and more, chilling. More states will, and today, we'll have people bragging about their right to not only carry a gun, but an AK-47 15 or whatever the hell that thing is. And I'm in a state where a 20-year-old kid walked into an elementary school with an automatic rifle in Newtown, Connecticut, and gunned down a whole bunch of wonderful little first graders. So those things going on, and trying to figure out how to keep schools sacrosanct and free for the well-being of everyone in them is really something else that, Neil, I don't know. It's not probably going on in your neck of the woods, but it sure is here.
Hearing that kind of thing, or being reminded of that kind of thing, I'm sometimes happy not to live in the United States anymore. But of course, this has been going on forever, and yeah, that's one thing. What you just said, but there is a thinker from the East Coast as well, Alfie Kohn, who I like a lot, who has been constantly for decades, I think for 3 or 4 decades, he's an academic talking about schools and education.
Yeah.
And he always argued that even the culture of measuring and badges and gold stars and so on that has infested education in the United States, but also, of course, beyond the United States. The constant testing and judging and of pupils, people, learners, that this has already cost our educational system a lot of credibility and effectiveness. So of course, are we seeing? There are trends that are even brutalizing education even more, like carrying guns at schools, the ongoing privatization and elitization of education in the United States and beyond. I mean, Germany is not free of that kind of effect, even though we are lagging behind on that area, on that negative front, of over privatizing. But we are not allowing colleges to be that expensive, for example, at least for now. But still, I mean, the let's say it is hard to be entirely optimistic about the evolution of school system and education systems in the developed world, in first country, in Europe, in America, and so on, for example, or especially. Looking at the degradation that has happened over the last kind of part of decades, right? We have to be optimistic because otherwise we cannot change anything. But it is also, I think, necessary to stop and accept that some of the trends are really bad. And I will give you another thing to laugh about. In German education, for example, we have a word that is called reform pedagogy, but for schools. Have you heard about that kind of expression, reform pedagogy? It means basically using the pedagogy or didactics of Maria Montessori, for example, who passed away 100 years ago or almost 90 years ago. Yeah. But we still call that kind of what I call modern pragmatic pedagogy. We still call it reform pedagogy, even 90 years after,
it's reformed.
So, like, are you talking about reform as in progressive, like as in?
Yes, exactly. So we call progressive let's take John Dewey from the United States, right?
Dewey, yes.
You can hardly call John Dewey's stuff new. It's hard, yeah. But still, the ethics of it have not prevailed, in our education system. It's like that everywhere. We have Paulo Freire in Brazil. We have the so-called reformers of education everywhere in the world, in England and in America and everywhere. In Italy, for example, Maria Montessori. We have Montessori schools in Germany, but it hasn't become the standard, even though the method, of course, is much more effective. And I'm not talking just about not testing that much. I'm also talking about, mixing school children of different ages or how do you call it? School years,
Grades, school grades,
to mix pupils of all kinds, to have them learn with each other, for each other, to teach children to take responsibility of their own learning. That hasn't prevailed. I mean, we are fighting it instead of implementing it or making it the standard. That is our negligence, so to speak. Dave?
No, I'm absolutely with you. And you mentioned what we could be hopeful about. We could be hopeful
Yes.
about that happening. If children in particular are being allowed and encouraged and supported in teaching each other, learning with each other, diving into puzzles of,
Yes.
where the solution is not obvious very early on, and continue that metaphor indefinitely.
Yes.
That I have some hope there. The other thing I have hope for as a community educator, going back to my original self-proclamation, is that there are innumerable sources where someone with a phone can go to YouTube or go to, and you name it, and even more serious sources. Serious meaning that they've made it through the editorial review process or whatever, but they can access them. They don't need to come and pay a huge amount of tuition at a college to investigate, to satisfy their curiosities. Now, granted, some of that stuff is just stuff. It probably isn't as useful to act on as something that perhaps is more scientifically based, however the words are. My point is, they're not going to stop. This new generation, they're not going to be patient and wait to be cloistered and see 5 weeks from now on the outline in the syllabus, they're actually going to talk about subject X. I came here because I'm passionate about subject X. What we did in business schools is absolutely terrible. We had to say, I want to come to this university and I want to be admitted to the business school. A lot of business schools say, no, we're not going to let you in until you're a junior, until you have a GPA grade point average of 3.2 or above. So you can't go in. So you're going to take all these prerequisite courses, accounting and calculus and all this. But the person says, but I am passionate. I have business ideas. I'm fascinated with why these global corporations act the way they do in the world. I want to study that now. No, you wait. When you're a junior, you'll be mature enough to deal with that.
I think
learners. Oh, we got to get, because Ryan's going to have a spasm if I don't stop.
you know me long enough. I do this, Niels, you too.
I love
the thing this really connects to for me is the idea of relative targets, the idea of the fixed targets of this week we're doing this week we're doing that, this week we're doing this, and this week we're doing that, and it is decided months ago, and it is approved by the curriculum, and then now if you go you get the certificate from this class or from all this the training aspect of it. So the training of that complicatedness, we can define this, we define this in these relationships, and it totally neglects what you're saying, Dave, about the curiosity and the passion and the desire to engage in the topic in the moment. And I think in that, you can't afford not to engage in the topic when you get to the business world. And also then, but the thing is that many in the business world who've been educated through the hierarchical system and the graded system, as Alfie Kohn has talked about, Niels, as you said, is that we have to have the budget, we have to have the plan, we have to do the fixed targets out into the future, and that if you hit the fixed targets, then you get the cookie at the end.
Get the cookie, yeah.
And what I think they're talking about here is that's a disservice to folks, and that's and that it's more important to do the preparation and to being with each other for each other in a Montessori mode. And I don't think that should end. Again, you're saying at elementary school. I think the Montessori education, also what we're doing with Comenius, I think this idea of with each other, for each other, self-organized learning, it's what Peter was doing, learning with the classes and thinking with the classes. I mean, and this, I think, gets us to the place where, okay, so we know what education for complicatedness has provided and what is wrought upon us. Now, what's the assertion? What are in those of us who wish to have a better world out there? What does educating for complexity look like? Okay, so we know what the world is. do we believe the world should be as if we are those who want to improve education?
I think that if I had the technology to basically equip someone very young with the means of exploring their curiosities, their fears, their hopes, all of that, equip them like we equip schools to do it in a formal way. Okay. Start with a very, not empowered, a powerful learner from the beginning. Give that learner power. As a parent, as a, just give those people credit for having the kind of minds that we absolutely are going to need in society going forward. We cannot have the kinds of matching with artificial intelligence with unintelligent people or people who don't believe in their own intelligence. We can't do that anymore. Now, so it's a wonderful moment. I think you would agree, Neil. It's a great moment for us to say, okay, undeniably, we have artificial means of doing a whole lot of computation side of human behavior. Great. So let's power up everyone, regardless of their age, and give them a budget and the tools to go ahead. Now, where's the guidance? Where do we teachers come in? We're in much more demand. We won't be we won't be off the roster if we are what I guess sort of cheekily calling free range. I think if we have much more superb learners out there, teachers will find them, and they'll find the teachers, and we'll convene. Now that means you want to have library spaces and all kinds of other public spaces where you can say, well, I'll see you at 2 and we'll have a discussion about that question. Now I know I'm being fanciful, but I'm also putting that in terms of the real war that we have to fight if we're going to have artificial intelligence on the one hand and dictatorial governance on the other, coming together and basically squeezing out the human learner. Just pop it out. We don't need you. If you come in here, you follow orders, we want you. But if you start thinking of the ways you're going to be doing the job, bye-bye. So that this is where we are right now. I'm going to be quiet.
All right, Niels. I would love to hear where you are with that and what education.
It's interesting. I mean, it's great that, Dave, that you brought up the technology theme and the AI theme. I favor a somewhat slightly different perspective on AI and education and where the challenge lies. I think that AI technology makes it even more obvious that current education systems have failed us. For example, once students and learners, school children, embrace even ChatGPT, it becomes obvious that the whole notion of cramming, testing, grading doesn't do us any service and doesn't produce any learning, because it's so easy with a little bit of technology, to game the system, very easy. So our failure to create spaces of discourse and conversation, intelligent questioning, self-questioning, pupils teaching each other instead of teachers testing children or learners. I think that is now, it is glaringly obvious in the light of AI and stuff that such systems are ridiculous. Even the whole notion of cramming and knowledge acquisition as a purpose of learning is super ridiculous. Now, we do not have to look back much to people like Montessori, John Dewey, and others to see that, of course, schools are not supposed to educate people for workplaces or to be willful cogs in the machine of corporations, but that education must produce citizens, capable of learning and producing, progress together. So I think AI produces no challenge for the modern education, and the modern teacher. Much the opposite. It makes many things much easier.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and as the same, of course, has been true for smartphones, for tablets, for word processing software, PowerPoint. For example, my younger son went to a Montessori school until for 13 years, and they had to do presentations to each other all the time. Teachers do not present stuff at Montessori schools. Basically, children, the pupils present to other pupils, and have to teach each other. So he was a masterful, PowerPoint maker and presenter and speaker and debater, because it was just part of the pedagogy. So, was all of that PowerPointing useful? No. Right? Did I hate some of the PowerPoints? Yes. But still, it's part of the process, to produce an empty PowerPoint and then notice that everybody falls asleep.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of the lesson,
And that lesson hasn't been learned here in corporate, in the corporate culture.
Exactly. Apparently, not enough people in corporations have learned that lessons in school, and I think we have to remind us, especially in days in which a more authoritarian regime in the United States has taken over power, or has been empowered by its citizens. I think it's important to remember that learning spaces, schools, colleges, all kinds of educational spaces are spaces of debate and discourse, and we have failed our societies, if I may include myself here a little bit, in spite of not being American. We have ignored that corporations, organizations, companies, workplaces are spaces of debate and learning and discourse and forming of democratic ideas. We have abandoned that idea, punishing people into their homes, hurting people in a way, in keeping them in their home offices instead of reopening the office, so to speak, if it's office work, of course. Instead of respecting that workplaces are spaces of conversation and of maturing democracies and improving democracies, we have abandoned that idea, and our systems of education have abandoned this idea a long time ago. They are not spaces of discourse anymore. They have been for a brief while in the United States, for example, between 68 and 74. There was a brief period of a lot of debate.
The golden years.
Palestine-Israel thing wasn't a debate at all, I think, neither in America nor in Germany.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Sadly, there wasn't much quality debate, for example, here at campuses in Germany, in Berlin. There was just outrage and pompous declaration of ideology, but very little discourse. So we have to recover that idea. We have to align pedagogy or didactics with the idea of democratic conversation building, so to speak.
See,
forming of citizenry.
Let's look at that in terms of what we said earlier. Let's go to the permanent whitewaters. Our host is probably watching the clock here. But, okay, so Peter said in the 70s when I was a student, but he published in his first well-known book, this notion that whitewater is the rate of change and it's permanent. See, there's two parts to that. Whitewater, picture it. You can see yourself crashing down through the rocks, but you cannot turn back. You can't turn around in whitewater and head back. And by the way, I asked him once in one of our webinar conversations, I said, Peter, aren't there some like eddies that you can pull off to, or some banks you can climb up onto and rest here in your analogy? He said, no. There was, he was he was at Harvard in the 50s. With Fritz Rullesberger and McClellan, some of the original thinkers, and they were thinkers as well as, they wrote stuff, but they mainly did a lot of very significant public thinking with their students. Anyway, my point is the permanent part. And this was in the 80s when he said this condition of the speed of changing is, from his, philosophy, permanent. So what we need is people who are knowledgeable for the moment, but learnable for the next. So we're not discounting the value of acquiring some knowledge as well as creating it, but recognize that it's ephemeral. It's not going to be now your ticket to ride. I know this particular surgical procedure, and I'm going to be able to do it over and over again for the next 30 years. No, because along comes robotics, and that surgeon's hands are no longer involved in the same way. On and on it goes. So that was where Peter was. Meantime, we have all of this going on around us and through us, and we have schools that are still thinking, still predicated upon the control model. Control is key. The reason you have all these syllabi and curriculum committees and all of that is the illusion of control, the myth of control. And so what's really important in the academics, if it was an ideal place, is self-control of everyone involved, for all the professors, the deans, the presidents, everyone trusting each other's integrity and purpose for being there, so that we're not layering on all of these constrictions and restrictions, which by the time I retired in 2016, and I'm in a very nice mid-size school named after a region of the state. So it's not like I'm at some kind of research one school or anything else. I was there to teach, and I taught. And the students were working class kids, and they came to learn because they knew that they needed a step up in life. So it was pretty good. But as these forces of shutting down and asserting control and compliance, can you imagine we had an office of sort of ethical compliance in our school? I mean, ethical compliance? Come on. So this was starting to happen, and I said, I'm working for Acme Manufacturing now by the time I'm retiring. So I was a curmudgeon and a gadfly and blah, blah, blah. But my point is that I wasn't saying it just out of my ego, even though you can see it's pretty damn big. It's because I have great, great concern for the population we're going to need to work in concert with artificial intelligence, but to have the edge, the increasing edge of the kinds of intelligences that we can develop through discourse and through problem finding and solving and all of that. We never needed it more as a world. In some parts of the world are probably onto that and are educating accordingly. And my part, the Western side, is still in the grips of control.
Yes.
I put you up here for a reason, Niels, because what Dave is talking about, as Dave was going through this, I was thinking about the BetaCodex principles. I was thinking about Comenius. I'm thinking about and about myself at work and all the Red 42 approaches, and that they all make sense in terms of this idea of individual empowerment, group work, group learning. And I'm wondering how you view the BetaCodex principles and the methods of introduction of democracy, federalization, and decentralization. How do you see the BetaCodex playing into this world of education going forward?
Yeah, I mean, not sure about you guys, but I have quite a few books in my personal library about the learning organization, or Peter Senke's book from the 1990s. What was it called? The fifth discipline. Fifth discipline, yes, which kind of opened the space of the learning organization. And then there are Japanese books about Toyota as a learning organization, and Lean being about learning organization. Of course, W. Edwards Deming advocated the same, right? People want pride at work, they want growth at work, they want to be part of something, and they want to develop ultimately. Yes? They don't want to be forced to reach targets and to be judged upon all the time. So all the things that we have been discussing in this session, they have been as vital for schools and colleges as for the workplace in principle, which was where we meander for decades, before dying, most of us, some kind of education, maybe even college, university, and then work for decades, and then But how to make sure that people during their work lives can, at their working hours of the day and commuting and so on, how can we make sure that people learn, have the opportunity to learn and grow and perceive themselves as human beings, spiritually, as Peter Vail would probably highlight. The spiritual part is also important. Absolutely. As citizens, but also as contributing to something beyond themselves, which is a big Viktor Frankl theme. So how to make sure that organizations can foster, or even not just encourage, but really
inspire?
No, I'm looking for something stronger. Of course, organizations must drive the learning. They must.
Yes,
they must make it an obligation to learn. And there's a great
compulsion.
A beautiful little piece of art by Joseph Beuys, the sculptor and painter from Germany. Joseph Beuys, he used fat and strange materials in his art. One of the greatest German artists of all time, Joseph Beuys, modern abstract art. And he once was so frustrated during I think it was a faculty session that he taught in Düsseldorf at the university in Düsseldorf. And at one point he got frustrated with an audience he had to work with, or students or learners he had to deal with. And he wrote on an index card, he wrote a legendary sentence. Those who do not, if you do not want to think, you are out. Those of you who refuse to think are out, are fired in modern today's language.
Yes.
Yeah. People who refuse to think are useless. It's okay not to, if you say you cannot think, you are overwhelmed by stuff, misfortune or whatever, tragedy, that can happen. So sometimes we cannot think that well, right? We are confused or depressive or whatever we are. But people who refuse to think, they are absolutely useless. Yes, for organizations and of course in schools as well. Yes. In a Montessori concept of teaching, somebody who refuses to think is the worst. Somebody who refuses to care is the worst. Look at the current American president. You wonder how that will play out. Somebody who refuses to think as head of a state. It's a problem. It's a big problem. It's a big deal. So refusal to think is the ultimate competitive disadvantage, so to speak. Yes. You cannot afford, as a beta organization, Ryan, you asked me about beta organizations. Beta organizations mean, and this is, I think, the key of self-organization, that the ability and the wanting and the having to and the must, all these dimensions of being. You want something, you have the ability to do something, but you also need to and must and have a responsibility to. When that combines, that is self-organization. Self-organization is not laissez-faire, do whatever you want, do only what you find interesting or beautiful or so on. It is to accept that there is also a need of others and society, to accept responsibility, that there is in value creation, for example, that some things need to be done. Yeah. By human beings. If they can be done by machinery or AI, that's wonderful, but some things have to be done. You have to write an invoice. Nobody likes that. But A few people like that, but but to accept that the wanting, the motivation, human nature at work, Douglas McGregor and many others, right? And our own need for purpose and for finding a place in the world and finding joy at work, all this, we need to accept that self-organization and better organization, beta organization in our wording, right? It requires the combination of these things: the acceptance of responsibility and the obligation to responsibility. As in a democracy, you cannot not be a citizen of your country. In the United States or in Germany, where you are and where I am, I cannot even not vote. I don't have to. We have an election coming up on the 23rd of February. I can refuse to go voting, but even then, I will be voting. I will be voting for the victor.
The vote, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the obligation of a citizen.
Yeah.
And in organizations, we cannot afford to have people in non-command control organizations as much. And the same goes for non-command control learning environments or education. The learner must take the responsibility for her or his own learning. It's
yes.
inevitable. Yes.
Yes.
So we need the freedom, the free will, and we need the acceptance of. There's a beautiful book by Peter Block and Peter
Kestenbaum. Yes, my new favorite book.
About accepting our freedom. Accepting our freedom means, now a strong word, to accept that we are that we cannot escape our own responsibility. And that is, I think, what a beta organization is about. That's why beta organizing, organizational decentralization is about democracy, is about liberty, citizenry, and freedom, ultimately, which is the toughest thing, because you cannot escape it. You can be in denial, but that will only produce more of a mess.
So someone might say free will is a fact of life.
Freedom. Free will is a fucker.
Well, my son's latest podcast with
we don't have to agree, by the way. We don't have to agree.
No, I agree, because he's been looking at the deepest levels of human interaction and conversation, and then all the way down to the way living entities persist. And just what you said is how an amoeba, an ape, a human, it's all about preparing for next. And there's an organic biological force within us that says, in order for us to survive, we have to gather what energy we have, add to it if we can through food, but then we're going to make a leap into uncertainty. And this is before it's meditated. It's like it feels uncertainty. It doesn't feel, and so I've got to get through it in order to keep going. So at very deepest level of us as living beings is a need for us to, I don't know, I just figure out what's next and do it. And so maybe we're talking about making more natural systems that people will tune into, attune themselves to more easily to be responsible learners and citizens and all the rest. So in the workplace, the extent to which they, like Toyota in their system, which we wrote about, in the 90s, my colleague and I wrote about them, is they basically said, of course, if someone notices that something's about to happen, we give them the chain to pull. We give them total power to stop the line at that moment. Titles, how CEO may be on the floor, that worker says, I see that this particular component or this particular maladjustment is likely to become a problem down the line. I'm going to deal with it. And they have a natural ability to do so because they're smart and they've learned and they have the eye that's trained. I'm not discounting having a lot of training. Now we have AI and AR and other ways to accelerate the learning that's called training. So they will be able to spot these moments when something must be done and have some idea what to do, but also the courage and the companionship to go ahead and try it and see how it works. It's almost scary, Ryan, how simple complexity is when you get to that point. Simple in the sense of saying, I'm living in a complex existence. I am a complex being, all the way down to the quantum physics of my cells. I am that way. I got to be part of this. I can't cut myself out by saying, no, I'm not a thinker. I'm just a dumbass. No, you can't do it. It won't allow you to. You will start to disintegrate as it. And boy, did I see it! All those years that I worked in Western Maine, and particularly with health education of the public, which we had a very large grant, just to say to people who were hugely obese, couldn't breathe from the smoking, couldn't stop having babies as 12-year-olds. All of that was people who basically insisted that they had a right to live that way. And as an educator, I had to say, all right, that's how you see it, but let me tell you what I see 5 years from now. And so it was a really interesting time for me to be with my fellow Mainers who were literally insisting they had a right to kill themselves. And my point was, well, do it to yourself, but recognize you got children.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So those conversations, but at least I was out there as a university educator in those little villages, talking about health, talking about the use of energy, talking about how they can have jobs, and very profound part of my life. And I would not have dared step off that campus if I didn't have what I said at the beginning of our call, which is this idea in my head that education is everywhere, and teaching it can be done by anyone, anytime. Now let's make that more consolidated and change the friggin' world.
Let's change the world.
Please do it. I'm in my 80s now. I want to see that change.
We want to see it.
My grave 20 years from now, they finally figured this out.
Hey, Dave, we did it.
We are starting to lose our patience, right, Dave?
I am. I'm no longer patient.
Yeah, to be impatient with what we can't control. Now, there is a question. We do have Ulrika Volter, who has put a question out there, and I want to make sure we honor that question here, coming from Niels's feed.
Ulrika, I know her. Okay. Real democracy is the ability to endure conflict and to be able to argue about content. There's currently only real discourse. There's probably little real discourse, but only ideological polarization into good and evil, right and wrong, black and big, because, etc. Society and organizations have settled into. Yeah, I think Ulrike agrees with us that we are in dire straits, right? That we have some work to do, and at least Dave and I, we are fed up with it, right? With waiting.
Man is hell and
hoping
more.
Actually, I'm fed up with also with experimentation, with trying, with dabbling, as I like to call it. You know, I recently read it again. I'm a big W. Edwards Deming fan. Dave, not sure if you know. I edited a book of quotes of W. Edwards Deming. He's a big hero of mine. Of course, I never met him, but
I did.
So I edited.
He's a fascinating guy.
Yes, and the ultimate teacher as well, and I think so full of civic courage and so on. Yeah, and
he'd love it.
Of course, very impatient.
He would go. Yes, he was, and he would go to that question that was just raised. I can picture him in a small amphitheater where I heard him speak, and he might say, because he was well into his 80s, he might say, "Well, I'm not going to answer that question. It's not a good question.
It's fucking stupid," as we would say. But I think he wrote something beautiful.
If you were in a gentler mood, he might say, "However, let me see if I understand your question by saying it in my way and see if we agree." And now you got a conversation. But yeah, he had a deep belief in learning.
I think when I'm 80,
clear away the system. so people could learn.
One of my objectives when I'm your age, Dave, is to say to people who ask stupid questions something like, "Can you ask a better question?" I don't have the time, Can you ask a better question, please?
So in other words, when you're 80, you'll be more laid back.
Yeah, you can really get away with a lot of poop.
A lot of shit
with everything. But I want to teach people a lesson. I see that this is part of the pedagogy, the didactics of conversation, to tell each other that was not a very good question. Let's try again. You can do better. We can do better. We can engage in real conversation if we concentrate more, if we focus more. It's important.
It's the better codex, not the beta. It's the better codex, not the beta codex.
It's not blunt, not supposed to be blunt, but it's supposed to be a little bit more direct than avoiding.
And we do have another comment here. I want to make sure we honor that as well.
And I want to talk about Edward Deming as well. Yeah. Ernesto is also attending from Argentina, by the way. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Oh, Ernesto.
How strong are the elements of the current system to confront and changes? We should deviate from the norm, as Frank Zappa stated. Very nice. Changing education should change the system. Yes. It's part of changing the system, right? Education is a system we need to urgently change.
Yes.
And
there are systems, no question about it. However, I must say, let's follow the money. In this state, Connecticut, we have school budgets, we have university budgets, all the sources the system needs economically to survive. And at the same time, we see money going more and more into software development, the engineering of artificial intelligence, to the extent that the amount of force of that money now with our billionaires running our government is unbelievable compared to the drip of money that comes into school budgets. That's a very dangerous imbalance. And I'd like to say, if I were the president, I would say, every dollar that you spend on artificial intelligence, I want another dollar to go into the human education system, dollar for dollar. And we'll still have plenty of money to build machines that act like humans, but we'll have another dollar that builds humans how to act even better as humans. Such a deal.
Paying to build for complicatedness, and hopefully at the same time to pay to educate for complexities we're talking about. I mean, that's the balance.
There you go.
I would like to add something, just the Deming thing I started to mention, because Dave, you just mentioned the economic side of it, why we are how we are economically abandoning education. This goes for the US, for Germany as much, in different ways, but same problem, I think. But there are other things that are for free. We can change the educational system for free as well. But we have to understand things better, and the reason why I mentioned Edward Deming on this matter is that I think in the 1970s, around 78 or so, he wrote a letter to a dean of a school he was teaching at, probably New York University or something like that.
New York University, yes.
Like that. Maybe Columbia. I'm not sure. So he wrote a letter to a dean. He must have been pissed, as we say today, yes. But very politely, he argued that teachers, educators should not be judged by their students, never ever. And that is conceptually flawed to have teachers, professors judged by their students. And that the only people who could judge an educator or a teacher would be peers.
Peers, exactly.
Yes. Nobody else is even remotely qualified to do that. He wrote a beautiful piece about that. And it's so true. I mean, that is one of the key factors, I think, that we need to remember all the time. Good education, it's not just about money. It's also about how we create the space. What kind of, Dave mentioned this earlier, what are we creating places of free mental endeavor, of free questioning, discourse, and reasoning, and of course, having professors judged by whatever, parents, or pupils
lawyers
is just fascist. How else can we describe that? It's twisted. It's a twisted ideology. Rating pupils is as twisted. It costs nothing. We could even save billions. The United States education system could save billions and billions of dollars stopping to do all the testing, all the grading. There are companies, corporations that earn shitloads of monies from from university and school grading. These companies, there is a 5 or so of those companies that have specialized in all the testing and that are just sucking money out of the education system. And that's a luxury nobody can afford and should afford. It's the wrong thing done in the wrong ways, and it kills learning and education. And some of these things are for free, or could even save money. Like organizations should not have HR departments. No company should have an HR department. The same.
Who's gonna hire us? Who's gonna hire us then to come in and help
do all this math grading? How are these math tests called? It's just a joke.
We're talking about the STEM education.
No. I mean the testing that's done pre-college.
The SAT, PSAT, ACT.
That's just garbage. That's just
for employees now. Yeah, some companies you don't even get to see another human until you've gone through bank after bank after bank of testing.
Yeah. So AI recruiting. It's the worst an organization can do. All this is ideology that's totally anti-humanistic. So yes, I wholeheartedly agreed with what the political agenda that Dave just advocated in truly democratic style. Match an AR dollar with an education dollar. I love that. But also keep in mind that good education is based on proper principles of learning, like Montessori principles, Dewey principles, democratic principles, Frankl principles, and so on, and not garbage, prejudiced ideology, that is making people's life miserable. And teachers' lives miserable as well.
And that last point I want to underscore as someone who raised a family being paid as a teacher and as an administrator of sorts. And my point is, we've done so much harm to the person who has the heart to teach in the last few years, particularly through the pandemic, but afterwards now going after that person who may utter a word that offends and all of that.
Yes.
The extent that it's enormously chilling and even fear-inducing to be a 5th grade teacher in even my state, which is a fairly well-balanced state, I guess. And we are seeing teaching people leaving. And yet there are still children there. And some of the people that I know personally who gave up on teaching were the best people to be teaching. They had the heart for it. They had the imagination for it. They fought the constrictors in good, in constructive ways to give the kids some room to actually grow and learn. And then they finally just couldn't do it anymore. So we're in a very crucial time in many levels. But when we
let me add something hopeful that I also see. I also see in Germany.
Please.
Yeah, because we cannot start on this depressive tone.
No.
Yeah. So I think what you said, Dave, is completely right. We cannot allow schools or colleges to be infested by fear. Neither students can, or learners, or children can be in fear, nor teachers. It's just it cripples the learning, of course.
It does.
What I also see here in Germany is, for example, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Germany has become an immigration country over the last couple of decades. Some people still cling to the idea that it's supposedly not a good thing. I think it's a brilliant thing, and we need immigration. The more America closes its frontiers, the more Germany will benefit. So please continue. Do the bullshit. Yeah? Fuck up your country. Close your. We want Mexicans. I love Mexicans. We want Latinos. We want people from everywhere. Yeah. However, of course, if you have a multi-ethnical, multicultural, multi-language society and citizenry, you also have teachers overwhelmed by the diversity in their classrooms. All kinds of diversity. Yes. Religious, language, all kinds of things. Yes. And what I see also, and what gives me hope, and I think Dave might have heard similar things, is that in Germany, for example, I know quite a few schools that have teachers, retired teachers coming back to schools and getting back into teaching.
I love that idea.
Yeah, because they have the time and the luxury to be able to, help children learn the language, or help them with their homework, offer additional courses. And I think that's the trend. The trend is that in rich countries like ours, we need, of course, the too early retired teachers to contribute again, because we are in dire straits, because the challenges have been growing and many factors have been, we are in decline. Our school systems are in decline, so we need people, coming back, or even competent people who are not teachers per se, but who can teach and can do that with quality.
Of course,
offering their service, let's say, to schools and to educational societies. I think we will see a lot more of that, also to make good education affordable and relevant again. No.
Well, young man, Ryan, we have spoken.
Well, this has been fantastic. I love it. I'm happy to have gone here. I hope you noticed that I did put something along the bottom. Hey, when it's over, it's over. It's not over. We didn't end at 1 hour past.
I think now it's over. Now it's. Thank you, David. This was lovely.
Now it's over
because it's over because I have to pee.
Well, there you go. Nature calls. So everyone out there, thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. This has been BetaCodex Live, or the Better Codex Live, with Niels Pflaeging, always. Our special guest, Dave Fearon. Dave, is there anything you wish to say to our audience that you have not yet said?
Yeah, I listened to these two gentlemen. I'm delighted to have met Niels the first time, and I love it. We are simpatico, and I've known Ryan and I are simpatico. So be simpatico with as many people as you can, and you'll have a wonderful life.
It's a Wonderful Life. Lovely movie. Fantastic. All right, everybody. See you next time on BetaCodex Live. Again, thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. Be beta.